Dr. Jake Morrison had always prided himself on his professional composure during first contact situations. He'd successfully communicated with the crystalline hegemony of Arcturus, maintained diplomatic relations with the hive mind colonies of the vegan system, and even managed to avoid offending the notoriously sensitive plant beings of Kepler 438b. Unfortunately, none of that experience had prepared him for the moment when Ambassador Kirathel of the Zephyrian Federation walked onto the bridge of the research vessel Curiosity's Dream, and his brain apparently decided to take an unscheduled vacation from professionalism. The thought hit him like a runaway freight train. Holy hell, that is one magnificent ass. Under normal circumstances, this would have been merely an embarrassing internal observation that he could have buried beneath layers of diplomatic small talk and scientific discussion. Unfortunately, these were not normal circumstances, and the Zephyrians were telepathic. Ambassador Kirathel stopped mid-step in her graceful approach to the captain's chair, her elegant pointed ears twitching slightly as her violet eyes widened with what Jake desperately hoped was surprise rather than offense. She was strikingly beautiful in a way that made human beauty standards seem quaint, tall and lean with silver markings that traced delicate patterns across her high cheekbones, and an overall appearance that managed to be both ethereal and remarkably, undeniably attractive. "I beg your pardon," she said in accented but perfect English, turning to face Jake with an expression that contained equal parts amusement and bewilderment. Jake felt his face go through several interesting color variations as the horrifying realization struck him. "Oh God, you heard that, didn't you?" "Heard would be the wrong term," Ambassador Kirathel replied, her voice carrying a note of what might have been suppressed laughter. Zephyrians perceive thoughts as a form of emotional resonance. Your appreciation was quite vivid. Captain Rodriguez, who had been observing the diplomatic introduction from her command chair, cleared her throat meaningfully. "Dr. Morrison, perhaps you'd like to begin again with the formal introductions?" "Yes, absolutely," Jake said, trying desperately to think about anything other than the way Ambassador Kirathel's form-fitting diplomatic attire accentuated her. "No, stop that, think about something else. Think about God, she's even more beautiful when she's trying not to laugh. I wonder what it would be like to." Ambassador Kirathel's eyebrows rose toward her hairline. "Dr. Morrison, I believe your thoughts may be experiencing some sort of cascade effect." "This is a disaster," Jake thought frantically. "I need to apologize, explain that I'm not normally this. Oh hell, now I'm thinking about how she moves like she's dancing and wondering what she'd be like to dance with, maybe hold close." "Fascinating," Ambassador Kirathel murmured, tilting her head in a way that made her pointed ears catch the bridge's lighting. "Your mental processes are quite energetic." Tom Chen, Jake's best friend and the ship's chief engineer, chose that moment to make his presence known by snorting with barely suppressed laughter. "Jake, buddy, you might want to try thinking about something boring. Like, I don't know, quantum mechanics or your laundry schedule." "Great advice, Tom," Jake thought sarcastically. "Except now I'm thinking about laundry, which makes me think about clothes, which makes me think about her not wearing." "Stop. Think about quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics are safe. Although I bet she'd look amazing in a lab coat." Ambassador Kirathel's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching fascination. "Your species has remarkably complex thought patterns. Most telepathic encounters I've experienced follow more linear progressions." "I am so sorry," Jake managed to say aloud, though his internal monologue continued its mortifying commentary. "She probably thinks all humans are perverted idiots. I should explain that I'm normally much more professional than this. I mean, I am attracted to her, obviously, but I'm also genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person, learning about her culture." Ambassador Kirathel went very still. "Dr. Morrison, could you repeat that last thought?" "Which part?" Jake asked weakly. "Because I've been thinking a lot of inappropriate things in the past few minutes. The part about getting to know me better." "Oh no," Jake realized with growing horror. "She thinks I was hitting on her." "Well, technically I guess I was, but not intentionally. I mean, I would like to get to know her better. She seems intelligent and fascinating, and obviously she's incredibly attractive, but I wasn't trying to. Dar. Morrison, Ambassador Kirithel interrupted, her voice carrying a strange note of formality. According to Zephyrian customs, you have just made what we would consider a formal mating proposal. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems and what sounded suspiciously like Tom trying to muffle his laughter with his hand. I what? Jake squeaked. A mating proposal, she repeated patiently. Your expressed desire to get to know me better, combined with your appreciation of my physical form and your stated interest in cultural exchange, follows the traditional pattern of Zephyrian courtship declarations. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward in her command chair. Ambassador, surely there's been some misunderstanding. Dr. Morrison's thoughts were clearly not intended as formal communication. Intent is less relevant than content in Zephyrian law, Ambassador Kirithel explained, though Jake noticed she looked almost as surprised by this turn of events as he felt. Among my people, thoughts are considered more honest than spoken words, since they cannot be easily controlled or concealed. But I wasn't trying to propose. Jake protested. I was just thinking. Loudly. Inappropriately. Though now that she mentions it, his traitorous brain added, the idea of getting to know her better is actually quite appealing. I wonder what she's like when she's not on official diplomatic duty. She probably has a great sense of humor, and those eyes suggest real intelligence. Ambassador Kirithel's lips twitched in what might have been the beginnings of a smile. Dr. Morrison, you're doing it again. This is a nightmare, Jake groaned, covering his face with his hands. Although if I have to accidentally propose to someone, at least she's incredibly attractive and seems to have a good sense of humor about impossible situations. And again. Duchess, the ship's AI, chose that moment to chime in through the bridge speakers with her distinctly posh British accent. If I may interrupt this delightful romantic comedy, I should point out that according to my databases, Zephyrian mating proposals require formal acceptance or rejection within 7 days, or they become legally binding by default. Legally binding? Jake repeated faintly. Oh yes, Duchess confirmed with obvious relish. Zephyrian marriage law is quite comprehensive. I've been studying it extensively since we received the ambassador's arrival schedule. Fascinating reading, really. Very romantic, in an alien sort of way. Ambassador Kirithel nodded slowly. The AI is correct. I have 7 days to either accept your proposal formally or provide grounds for rejection that satisfy the Zephyrian Council of Elders. What kind of grounds? Captain Rodriguez asked, her diplomatic training clearly kicking in. Incompatibility, unworthiness, or evidence that the proposal was made in bad faith, Ambassador Kirithel replied. Since Dr. Morrison's thoughts clearly indicate genuine attraction and interest, bad faith is not applicable. Jake stared at her in horror. So you have to either marry me or prove I'm unworthy of you. That is, an accurate if simplified summary, yes. This is insane, Jake thought desperately. Although, she doesn't seem upset about it. Actually, she seems almost curious. I wonder if she finds humans as interesting as I find Zephyrians. She's probably dealt with dozens of species before, but maybe we're novel to her too. Dar. Morrison, Ambassador Kirithel said softly, you might want to be aware that your thoughts are becoming increasingly flattering. Tom finally gave up trying to contain his laughter. Jake, you have officially achieved the worst first impression in the history of interstellar diplomacy. On the contrary, Ambassador Kirithel said, surprising them all, I find Dr. Morrison's mental honesty quite refreshing. Most diplomatic encounters involve careful layers of protocol and hidden meanings. This is, remarkably straightforward. She thinks I'm straightforward, Jake thought, feeling a small flicker of hope. That's good, right? I mean, I am being honest, even if it's involuntary. And she seems to appreciate that. Maybe this isn't completely hopeless. Dr. Morrison, Ambassador Kirathel said with what was definitely amusement now, you have 7 days to prove your worthiness according to Zephyrian custom. I suggest you spend that time learning to shield your thoughts, or our courtship period is likely to be quite eventful. Courtship period. Jake's brain provided helpfully. She said courtship period. That implies she's actually considering this. Maybe I should. 7 days, he said aloud, trying to regain some semblance of professional dignity. Right. I can work with 7 days. Although what am I supposed to do in 7 days to prove I'm worthy of someone who's clearly intelligent, diplomatic, beautiful, and apparently has a sense of humor? Maybe I should ask what the traditional courtship trials involve. The traditional trials, Ambassador Kirathel said, responding to his unspoken question, test emotional stability, intellectual compatibility, and protective instincts. They're designed to determine whether a potential mate can provide the mental and emotional partnership that Zephyrian bonding requires. Right, Jake said weakly. No pressure. Actually, he found himself thinking as he looked at Ambassador Kirathel's elegant features and intelligent eyes, maybe this isn't the worst thing that could have happened. She's fascinating, and if I have to prove myself worthy of her, at least it's a challenge worth rising to. Ambassador Kirathel smiled, and Jake realized she'd heard that thought too. 7 days, Dr. Morrison, she repeated. I find myself curious to see what you'll do with them. As she gracefully exited the bridge, leaving behind a bewildered crew and one mortified xenobiologist, Jake couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, his uncontrolled thoughts had accidentally gotten him into something that might turn out to be the best mistake of his life. Did she hear that too? He wondered. From the corridor outside, Ambassador Kirathel's laughter echoed back toward the bridge, suggesting that yes, she definitely had. Jake discovered that learning to shield his thoughts from a telepathic species was roughly equivalent to learning to hold his breath while running a marathon, theoretically possible, but practically guaranteed to result in embarrassing failure at the worst possible moment. This became painfully apparent during his first official, courtship consultation, with Ambassador Kirathel, when his carefully rehearsed apology was derailed by the way she tucked a strand of silver hair behind one of her pointed ears. Focus, Morrison, he told himself sternly. You're here to explain the misunderstanding, not to think about how graceful her hands are. There was no misunderstanding, Dr. Morrison, Ambassador Kirathel said gently, settling into one of the observation lounge's chairs with fluid elegance. Your thoughts were quite clear in their intent, even if that intent was subconscious. But I didn't mean to propose. Jake protested, then immediately winced as his brain helpfully added. Although now that I've spent the last 18 hours thinking about it, the idea is growing on me. She's obviously brilliant, and that laugh of hers. I'm beginning to understand why humans find telepathy disturbing, Kirathel observed with amusement. You seem to have very little control over your mental processes. It's not usually this bad, Jake said defensively. I think you're just distracting. Very distracting. The way she moves is like watching poetry in motion, and when she concentrates, she gets this little furrow between her eyebrows that's absolutely adorable. Kirathel's violet eyes widened slightly. Dr. Morrison, what did you just call me? Distracting? Jake replied, confused. After that. You used a human term I'm not familiar with. Jake replayed his thoughts and felt his face heat up. I may have called you adorable. Adorable, she repeated thoughtfully. This is a positive designation. Very positive, Jake confirmed, then immediately regretted it as his brain launched into a detailed catalogue of everything he found adorable about her expression, her laugh, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Fascinating, Kirathel murmured. Your mental patterns are quite different from what our xenopsychologists predicted. Human emotional responses appear to be far more layered than we assumed. Tom's voice crackled through the comm system. Jake, you might want to know that we've got a delegation of Zephyrians requesting to observe the courtship trials. Apparently, human-Zephyrian bonding attempts are considered unprecedented. Great, Jake thought. Now I get to embarrass myself in front of multiple telepathic aliens. Actually, Kirithel said, the delegation's interest is quite flattering. My people are naturally curious about species with non-telepathic consciousness. Your thought processes represent a completely novel form of mental architecture. Mental architecture. The way your thoughts build upon each other, create associations, branch into multiple simultaneous considerations, she explained. Most telepathic species think in more linear patterns. Your mind constructs elaborate conceptual frameworks in seconds. She thinks my mental chaos is interesting rather than annoying, Jake realized with surprise. That's actually kind of wonderful. It is wonderful, Kirithel agreed softly. I've never encountered a mind that creates such complex emotional landscapes so effortlessly. Before Jake could respond, the observation lounge doors opened to admit what appeared to be a small parade of Zephyrians. The lead figure was tall even by their species standards, with silver markings that covered more of his face and neck than Kirithel's, suggesting advanced age or high status. Ambassador, the newcomer said with formal precision, I am cultural attaché Morden. I bring greetings from the Council of Elders and authorization to observe the worthiness trials. Worthiness trials, Jake's brain repeated nervously. That sounds ominous. I wonder what they involve. Probably tests of intelligence, physical capability, maybe cultural knowledge. The trials are designed to assess compatibility, not superiority, Kirithel said, responding to his unspoken concerns. They examine whether two individuals can form the kind of mental and emotional partnership that sustains Zephyrian bonding. Cultural attaché Morden studied Jake with obvious curiosity. Remarkable. His thought patterns are indeed quite energetic. How does he maintain coherent consciousness with such mental activity? I'm sitting right here, Jake pointed out, then immediately thought, although I suppose being discussed like a scientific specimen is better than being completely ignored. At least they find me interesting. Dar. Morrison raises an excellent point about communication protocols, Morden said approvingly. Direct address is more efficient than tertiary discussion. Tell me, human, what do you know of Zephyrian bonding practices? Absolutely nothing beyond what I've learned in the last day and a half, Jake thought honestly. Though I'm very interested in learning more, especially if it means understanding Kirithel better. Kirithel's cheeks showed a faint flush of color. Dr. Morrison, your thoughts regarding me are becoming quite personal. Sorry, Jake said, then couldn't help adding, though I'm not really sorry, because thinking about you is actually quite pleasant, even when it's embarrassing. Morden made what appeared to be notes on a device that looked like crystallized light. Fascinating. He appears to experience no cognitive dissonance between embarrassment and affection. Most species would find these emotional states contradictory. Human emotions are apparently more complex than our initial assessment suggested, Kirithel said. Dr. Morrison seems capable of experiencing multiple emotional states simultaneously without psychological distress. Is that unusual? Jake wondered. I mean, it's normal to feel embarrassed about being attracted to someone while still enjoying the attraction. Isn't it? Among telepathic species, emotional states tend to be more singular, Morden explained. Clear mental communication requires coherent emotional broadcasting. Your ability to maintain multiple simultaneous feelings suggests a level of cognitive complexity we hadn't anticipated. So I'm not just perverted, I'm also evolutionarily interesting? Jake asked. Kirithel laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with gentle rain. Dr. Morrison, you are many things, but perverted is not among them. Your thoughts regarding me have been remarkably respectful, considering the circumstances. Well, I was raised to respect women, even in my thoughts, Jake reflected. Though I have to admit, thinking respectful thoughts about someone I'm incredibly attracted to while knowing they can hear everything is a unique form of torture. Torture? Kirithel repeated, her expression shifting to concern. Not literal torture, Jake clarified quickly. More like pleasant frustration. It's hard to explain. It's like being hungry while sitting in front of a fantastic meal you're not sure you're allowed to eat, he thought. Except the meal is a brilliant, beautiful woman who might actually be interested in getting to know me better. That is a remarkably apt metaphor, Mordan observed. You compare romantic attraction to nutritional desire, both essential needs that create anticipation and satisfaction when fulfilled. I wasn't really thinking of it as a metaphor, Jake admitted. It just seemed like an accurate comparison. Kirathel leaned forward slightly. Dar. Morrison, may I ask you something personal? Everything about this situation is personal, Jake thought. But yes, please, ask me anything you want. When you first saw me, your initial appreciation was quite focused on my physical appearance. But your thoughts have evolved considerably since then. Can you explain that progression? Jake considered the question seriously. At first, yes, I was just struck by how attractive you are. But then you started talking, and I realized you're incredibly intelligent and have this wonderful sense of humor about impossible situations. And the way you've handled this whole accidental proposal thing with such grace. I guess physical attraction was just the starting point. You find intelligence attractive? She asked with genuine curiosity. Very attractive, Jake thought immediately. There's something about watching someone think, seeing them process information and draw conclusions. It's incredibly appealing. Kirathel's flush deepened. I see. That is quite different from typical Zephyrian courtship patterns. Different how? Jake asked, genuinely curious. Zephyrian attraction is primarily based on mental compatibility and emotional resonance, she explained. Physical appearance is considered largely irrelevant since we communicate primarily through telepathy. So when I was thinking about how beautiful you are, that was probably completely foreign to you, Jake realized. But maybe not unwelcome. Not unwelcome, she confirmed quietly. Simply, novel. I've never experienced being appreciated for my physical form before. It's quite pleasant. Mordan made more notes on his crystalline device. This interaction suggests significant potential for successful bonding. Both parties demonstrate adaptability and mutual interest in their respective differences. Does that mean I'm passing the trials so far? Jake asked hopefully. Because I really want to pass, he added mentally. Not just because of the diplomatic implications, but because I genuinely want the chance to get to know Kirathel better. The formal trials begin tomorrow, Mordan said. But this preliminary assessment has been quite encouraging. After the Zephyrian delegation departed, Jake and Kirathel remained in the observation lounge, watching the stars while slowly past the viewport. Dr. Morrison, she said softly, may I share something with you? Of course. I volunteered for this diplomatic mission specifically to study human consciousness, she admitted. My people are fascinated by non-telepathic species, and I was curious about how minds function when they cannot share thoughts directly. So I'm a research subject, Jake thought, trying not to feel disappointed. You were, she said gently. But that changed the moment you accidentally proposed to me. How did it change? Kirathel turned to face him fully. Because now I find myself genuinely hoping that you'll succeed in proving your worthiness. Not for diplomatic reasons, but for personal ones. Jake felt his heart skip several beats. You mean that? I mean it, she said, and her smile was like sunrise on an alien world, beautiful, promising, and full of possibilities he'd never imagined. This is definitely not how I expected this mission to go, Jake thought. No, Kirathel agreed with a laugh. But perhaps the unexpected is exactly what we both needed. The first worthiness trial, Jake learned, involved navigating a telepathic obstacle course while maintaining what the Zephyrians diplomatically termed cognitive stability. What this actually meant became clear when he found himself standing in the ship's cargo bay, which had been transformed into something resembling a funhouse designed by someone who had strong opinions about the nature of reality. The trial simulates the kind of mental pressures you would experience in a permanent telepathic bond, cultural attaché Morden explained, gesturing toward what appeared to be a maze made of crystalline walls that shifted and flowed like living things. You must reach the center while maintaining coherent thought patterns despite constant telepathic interference. Telepathic interference? Jake thought nervously. That sounds ominous. It is designed to test your ability to maintain your individual consciousness while sharing mental space with another being, Kirathel clarified. She was wearing what appeared to be monitoring equipment that would allow her to track his mental state throughout the trial. Many non-telepathic species find the experience overwhelming. Great, Jake thought. No pressure at all. Commander Veltar, the leader of the Zephyrian faction Jake had learned was opposed to human-Zephyrian bonding, stepped forward with an expression that managed to convey skepticism and distaste simultaneously. This human's chaotic mental patterns are likely to prove dangerous in a telepathic environment. I predict cognitive collapse within the first segment. Cognitive collapse sounds bad, Jake observed. Also, I don't like this guy's attitude. Commander Veltar believes that human emotional complexity makes your species unsuitable for telepathic integration, Kirathel explained diplomatically. This trial will help determine the accuracy of that assessment. Jake studied the shifting maze with its crystalline walls and floating obstacles that seemed to be made of crystallized thoughts. What exactly happens if I fail? Nothing dangerous, Morden assured him. You would simply be removed from the trial environment and declared incompatible with Zephyrian bonding practices. Which would mean no marriage to Kirathel, Jake realized. Which, considering I accidentally proposed to her 2 days ago, should be a relief. So why does the idea of failing make me feel like I'm about to lose something incredibly important? Because, Kirathel said softly, you've realized that what began as an accident might actually be exactly what you want. Jake looked at her, struck once again by her elegant beauty and the intelligence that sparkled in her violet eyes. You're right. I do want this. I want the chance to get to know you, to see if what's developing between us could become something real. Then prove it, she said with a smile that was equal parts challenge and encouragement. Jake stepped into the maze, and immediately understood why Commander Veltar expected him to fail. The crystalline walls didn't just block his path, they generated a constant stream of telepathic white noise that felt like having a dozen radios playing different stations directly inside his skull. His first instinct was to fight against the mental intrusion, but that only made the interference worse. Okay, Morrison, he told himself, think about this logically. Fighting the telepathy isn't working, so maybe I need to try a different approach. Instead of resisting the mental noise, he tried to incorporate it into his own thought patterns, treating it like background music rather than unwanted interference. To his surprise, this actually worked, the telepathic static became manageable, even oddly soothing. Interesting technique, came Kirathel's voice in his mind, clearer than the background noise. You're not blocking the telepathic input, you're integrating it. Is that good or bad? Jake wondered as he navigated around a wall that tried to show him his most embarrassing childhood memories. Very good, she replied with what felt like mental warmth. Most beings either shield completely or are overwhelmed by telepathic contact. Your approach is unique. The maze's challenges grew more complex as Jake progressed. He found himself facing obstacles that required him to solve problems while maintaining telepathic contact with Kirathel, coordinating their efforts to overcome barriers that couldn't be passed alone. Your turn, he thought to her as they approached a puzzle that required simultaneous mental and physical manipulation. I can handle the physical components, but the telepathic elements are beyond me. Together, then, she replied, and Jake felt their minds sync in a way that was both intimate and incredibly effective. Working as a team, they navigated through challenges that tested not just Jake's ability to maintain coherent thoughts under telepathic pressure, but his capacity for mental cooperation and emotional stability. Each success built their connection, creating a feedback loop of shared accomplishment and growing trust. This is remarkable, Morden's voice came from outside the maze. His neural patterns are not only stable, they're enhancing the telepathic connection rather than degrading it. Impossible, came Commander Veltar's skeptical response. Human consciousness cannot improve telepathic efficiency. Watch and learn, Jake thought with satisfaction as he and Kirathel solved another complex puzzle through perfect mental coordination. The final challenge appeared to be a simple door at the maze's center, but Jake could sense the complex telepathic lock that secured it. Opening it required not just his own mental effort, but a perfect synthesis of his consciousness with Kirathel's. A temporary but complete mental union. "Are you ready?" she asked, and he could feel her nervousness alongside her anticipation. "As ready as I'll ever be for my first mind meld," Jake replied. "Although I should probably warn you that my thoughts can be pretty chaotic." "I've noticed," she said with mental laughter. "I find the chaos quite endearing." The mental merger was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. For a moment that lasted forever, he wasn't just Jake Morrison, he was part of something larger, a consciousness that combined his human curiosity and emotional complexity with Kirathel's telepathic awareness and centuries of accumulated wisdom. Through her mind, he experienced the universe as Zephyrians did, a vast web of interconnected consciousness where thoughts and emotions flowed like rivers of light. Through his mind, she experienced human individuality. The fierce independence and creativity that came from consciousness that developed in isolation, the unique perspectives that arose from minds that learned to think without external input. Beautiful, they thought together as the door opened and the trial ended. Jake found himself back in the cargo bay, surrounded by impressed Zephyrians and one very frustrated Commander Veltar. "Unprecedented," Mordan announced. Not only did Dr. Morrison complete the trial successfully, but his performance improved consistently throughout the process. His mental integration with Ambassador Kirathel achieved levels we typically see only in bonded pairs with decades of experience. Commander Veltar's expression grew even more disapproving. One successful trial proves nothing. The human's chaotic mental patterns could still prove dangerous in extended contact. "This guy really doesn't like me," Jake observed. "Commander Veltar fears change," Kirathel explained mentally. "He believes that contact with non-telepathic species will somehow diminish Zephyrian consciousness." "Well, I guess I'll just have to prove him wrong," Jake thought with determination. "The second trial will test protective instincts and emotional stability," Mordan announced. "It will take place tomorrow." As the Zephyrian delegation dispersed, Kirathel approached Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "That was intense," he said, still processing the experience of temporary mental fusion. "It was beautiful," she replied softly. "I've never experienced consciousness from a non-telepathic perspective before. Your mind creates such vivid conceptual landscapes. And your mind is like swimming in starlight," Jake thought. "I've never felt anything so vast and peaceful." "Dr. Morrison," she said formally, then switched to mental communication. "Jake, what we shared in there, it felt like the beginning of something profound." "I felt it too," he replied. "Like we were designed to complement each other." Perhaps we were, she thought with a smile that made his heart race. Perhaps this accidental proposal was not so accidental after all. Looking at her elegant features and feeling the afterglow of their mental connection, Jake found himself thinking that maybe the universe had a sense of humor after all, and maybe sometimes the best relationships really did begin with the most embarrassing possible first impressions. "That thought is not embarrassing," Kirathel corrected gently. "It's hopeful. And hope is the most beautiful thought of all." The final worthiness trial was interrupted by what the ship's emergency systems diplomatically described as a catastrophic cascade failure in the quantum containment matrix, but which Jake's more practical engineering experience translated as, "We're all about to die unless someone fixes this immediately." The crisis began during what should have been a simple test of Jake's protective instincts, a simulation designed to measure his response to perceived threats against Kirathel. Instead, the ship's actual alarm started screaming, and Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. "All hands to emergency stations. We have a breach in the quantum drive containment field." Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 12 minutes. Well, Jake thought as he watched the Zephyrian delegation switch from formal observers to genuinely concerned aliens, this is definitely not how I expected the trials to go. Dar. Morrison, Commander Veltar announced with what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction, human presence on this vessel has clearly disrupted our ship's quantum harmonics. This failure proves that your species is incompatible with advanced technology. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Jake thought automatically, then caught himself as he realized everyone present had heard that opinion. Actually, Kirithel said with dangerous calm, the failure appears to be originating from the Zephyrian quantum resonance amplifiers, not human technology. Tom Chen's voice crackled through the comm system from engineering, Jake, I need you down here now. The containment field is fluctuating in ways that don't match our repair protocols, and Captain Rodriguez says you're our best bet for creative problem solving. Jake looked around the room at the assembled Zephyrians, particularly Commander Veltar, who was watching the situation with obvious anticipation of human failure. Fine, he thought. If this is going to be my final trial, at least I'll go out trying to save everyone. I'll help, Kirithel announced, falling into step beside him as they headed for the engineering section. You don't need to risk yourself for human incompetence, Commander Veltar called after them. Human incompetence? Jake thought with growing irritation. I'll show him human incompetence. Jake, Kirithel said softly as they hurried through the corridors, your anger is quite intense. But also focused. Directed not at personal insult, but at the threat to everyone on board. Of course it is, Jake replied. Personal insults don't kill people. Quantum containment failures do. The engineering section was controlled chaos when they arrived. Tom was coordinating repair efforts while Captain Rodriguez managed communications with both the human bridge crew and the Zephyrian technical specialists. At the center of it all, the quantum drive containment field flickered like a dying light bulb, its protective barriers failing in patterns that defied conventional physics. Talk to me, Tom, Jake called out, immediately moving toward the primary control console. The containment field is resonating with something, Tom replied, not looking up from his diagnostic readouts. It's like the quantum matrix is trying to harmonize with an external signal, but the frequency keeps shifting. Jake studied the readings, his mind automatically processing the technical data while simultaneously maintaining his telepathic connection with Kirithel. Through their mental link, he could sense her analyzing the same information from a completely different perspective, one that took into account the telepathic nature of Zephyrian technology. Jake, she thought urgently, I think the problem is interaction between our two technologies. The Zephyrian quantum amplifiers operate on telepathic resonance frequencies, but your ship systems are creating interference patterns. Can you adjust the resonance frequency? He asked, his hands already moving over the human control systems. Not alone, she admitted. But together. Captain, Jake called out, I need authorization to interface our systems with Zephyrian technology. The final worthiness trial was interrupted by what the ship's emergency systems diplomatically described as a catastrophic cascade failure in the quantum containment matrix, but which Jake's more practical engineering experience translated as, we're all about to die unless someone fixes this immediately. The crisis began during what should have been a simple test of Jake's protective instincts, a simulation designed to measure his response to perceived threats against Kirithel. Instead, the ship's actual alarm started screaming, and Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. All hands to emergency stations. We have a breach in the quantum drive containment field. Estimated time to catastrophic failure, 12 minutes. Well, Jake thought as he watched the Zephyrian delegation switch from formal observers to genuinely concerned aliens, this is definitely not how I expected the trials to go. Dar. Morrison, Commander Veltar announced with what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction, human presence on this vessel has clearly disrupted our ship's quantum harmonics. This failure proves that your species is incompatible with advanced technology. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Jake thought automatically, then caught himself as he realized everyone present had heard that opinion. Actually, Kirithel said with dangerous calm, the failure appears to be originating from the Zephyrian quantum resonance amplifiers, not human technology. Tom Chen's voice crackled through the comm system from engineering. Jake, I need you down here now. The containment field is fluctuating in ways that don't match our repair protocols, and Captain Rodriguez says you're our best bet for creative problem solving. Jake looked around the room at the assembled Zephyrians, particularly Commander Veltar, who was watching the situation with obvious anticipation of human failure. Fine, he thought. If this is going to be my final trial, at least I'll go out trying to save everyone. I'll help, Kirithel announced, falling into step beside him as they headed for the engineering section. You don't need to risk yourself for human incompetence, Commander Veltar called after them. Human incompetence? Jake thought with growing irritation. I'll show him human incompetence. Jake, Kirithel said softly as they hurried through the corridors, your anger is quite intense. But also focused. Directed not at personal insult, but at the threat to everyone on board. Of course it is, Jake replied. Personal insults don't kill people. Quantum containment failures do. The engineering section was controlled chaos when they arrived. Tom was coordinating repair efforts while Captain Rodriguez managed communications with both the human bridge crew and the Zephyrian technical specialists. At the center of it all, the quantum drive containment field flickered like a dying light bulb, its protective barriers failing in patterns that defied conventional physics. Talk to me, Tom, Jake called out, immediately moving toward the primary control console. The containment field is resonating with something, Tom replied, not looking up from his diagnostic readouts. It's like the quantum matrix is trying to harmonize with an external signal, but the frequency keeps shifting. Jake studied the readings, his mind automatically processing the technical data while simultaneously maintaining his telepathic connection with Kirithel. Through their mental link, he could sense her analyzing the same information from a completely different perspective, one that took into account the telepathic nature of Zephyrian technology. Jake, she thought urgently, I think the problem is interaction between our two technologies. The Zephyrian quantum amplifiers operate on telepathic resonance frequencies, but your ship systems are creating interference patterns. Can you adjust the resonance frequency? He asked, his hands already moving over the human control systems. Not alone, she admitted. But together. Captain, Jake called out, I need authorization to interface our systems with Zephyrian technology. It's the only way to stabilize the containment field. Do it, Captain Rodriguez replied immediately. Whatever it takes. What followed was the most complex technical challenge Jake had ever faced. Working in perfect mental synchronization with Kirithel, he had to simultaneously understand human quantum mechanics and Zephyrian telepathic engineering, then find a way to make them work together instead of against each other. Your approach is remarkable, Kirithel thought as they coordinated their efforts. You're not trying to make one system dominant over the other. You're creating synthesis. That's what humans do, Jake replied, his hands flying over controls while his mind worked through calculations at speeds that surprised even him. We adapt, improvise, find ways to make incompatible things work together. Through their mental link, he could feel Kirithel's wonder at his problem-solving approach. Where Zephyrian engineers would have sought elegant, harmonious solutions, Jake was building what could only be described as a beautiful mess, a hybrid system that combined human practicality with telepathic precision in ways that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. 10 seconds to containment failure, the ship's computer announced with mechanical calm. Now or never, Jake thought, initiating the hybrid system. The quantum containment field stabilized with a harmonic resonance that seemed to sing through both the human and Zephyrian sections of the ship. The crisis was over, but more than that, the solution had created something entirely new. Fascinating, cultural attaché Morden observed, studying the readouts with obvious amazement. Dr. Morrison has created a stable quantum telepathic interface. Our technologies are now operating in perfect harmony. Commander Veltar, who had followed them to engineering, stared at the displays with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. This should not be possible. Human consciousness cannot interface with telepathic quantum systems. Apparently it can, Jake said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Especially when it's working with someone who understands both systems.